So the Shema Yisrael has a very important lesson for us. The first paragraph is the idea of a person accepts upon himself the yoke, the wears, the responsibilities of being a servant to God. The second paragraph has to do with accepting upon oneself the yoke or the responsibility of the commandments. And the third the third paragraph has to do with actually a independent Torah level commandment, which is to remember coming out of Egypt. So I'm going to start on that point for a minute and go back and then go in all kinds of different directions. And hopefully by the end, it'll all make sense. What does it mean to remember coming out of Egypt? How the heck can you remember coming out of Egypt if you never were in Egypt? I mean, maybe our great-great-great-great-grandparents were in Egypt, but you weren't. I wasn't. So hold that question for a minute. Next question. One of the most primary ways in which we remember coming out of Egypt is on Passover. On the night of Passover, when we eat matzah and we make the whole Seder and the events that we do and so on. And yet, if you look at the book called the Haggadah that we use on Passover, there's something very strange in that book, which if you really paid attention, will blow your mind. Why? Because it says, it refers to a war. And that war, it uses three references. It says Dam, Esh, and Timrat Oshan. Dam is blood, Esh is fire, and Timrat Oshan is a very weird words. A Timrat or a Tomer is a date palm tree. And Oshan means smoke. So it means a date palm tree made out of smoke. Could you imagine going into war and all of a sudden tanks are coming down the road at you and you pull out these date palm trees and fire smoke at them? I mean, really, what kind of a weapon is a date palm tree? And made out of smoke, no less. So what happened was the prophet, the Navi, the prophet had a vision of this war, and he saw something that in his generation, there was no word to describe it. So what he did was he described it as a metaphor. He said, well, I don't know what to call this, but I could tell you what it looks like. It looks like a date palm tree made out of smoke. Now, in our generation, we have a word for that. We call it the atom bomb. Because the atom bomb is the only, and nuclear bomb, are the only forms of explosion that actually implode and then explode. So when the atom is breaking, it's imploding, and that creates a column, like a mushroom. And only when it stops imploding does it then explode, and that creates the top. So the prophet, the Navi, was seeing a war that had these atom bombs blowing up, but he didn't know what to call them. Now, that particular prophet, that Navi, his name in Hebrew is Yoel. In English, we pronounce it Joel, but his Hebrew name was Yoel. And here's the funny thing about the book of Yoel. I believe it only has 6 chapters. It's one of the smallest books in the Bible, and it does not talk about Egypt. There is nothing in the book that talks about being slaves in Egypt. So what the heck is that doing in the Passover book? when the whole night of Passover is to remember coming out of Egypt, which we never did, because you and I were never, I don't know about you, I certainly was never in Egypt. So how can I remember coming out of a place I never came out of? And second of all, why is it talking about a war that's could happen? I don't want to get Avram all freaked out because I told him that the Armageddon is not a Jewish thing. So don't freak out. In fact, I will even tell you maybe the difference between us Jews and those guys, what they say about how we relate to prophecy in one more second. But let's finish this point first, because I already saw the freak out look coming on your face. That's why I had to say that. So so the answer is as follows. What began in Egypt 3,000 plus years ago did not finish. It began a journey that ends with Mashiach and the third Beit HaMikdash. Therefore, the prophet, even though he's talking about the future, is very appropriate for Passover night, because it's like you show somebody, okay, look, we're going to go on the highway. We're leaving here, but I have a map. As we go, we're going to get to this city and then that city and then that city. So the prophet was showing us where this is going to. So therefore, in that story of Passover night, we say that every generation is obligated to see themselves as if they went out of Egypt. Now, that doesn't mean that you just start walking around like, you know, like an Egyptian hieroglyphic or something. That doesn't mean to do that. It doesn't mean that. It means that Egypt in the year 2021 is called Nigeria. Egypt in the year 2021 is called Russia. It's called New York. It's called South Africa. That's Egypt 2021. And so therefore, all of us have to see what is the Egypt of our generation, who is the Pharaoh of our generation, and who and how can we get out of there? That's what it means. It's like in a person's body, you have a spine, and the spine has all of these, I forgot what they're called in English, all of these like pieces. And so it's all one spine, but each piece is a different generation. And therefore, if we do the remembering of coming out of Egypt as it talks to us in our generation, we are continuing that journey that began then. Now, just a little side point about the War of Armageddon, because I think it's really important. You know, many times the Christians like to talk about the Christo-Judean roots, you know, how they are really just like the add-on to Judaism. Yeah, Judaism is cool, but here you've got the new 2.0 version, so you could just plug that in, you know, which is really funny. Then why did they reject the Muslim who come along and say 3.0? Well, whatever, that's not our problem. We always like to say we're the original. So as the original, what is our understanding? It's really amazing. Watch this. This will change your whole perception of prophecy, how it works, or one aspect, how it works. If I were a palm reader, if I knew how to read the lines on your hand, for example, or I knew how to read your birthmarks, or I knew how to figure out the day you were born, where the sun and the moon and the planets were, all of these different things, and I would be able to say to you, I would say, okay, now listen, by the time you're 40 years old, you will be this, 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 and this. What does that mean? Is that a lie? No. Is it true? No. So what is it? If it's not a lie and it's not true, what is it? The answer is, it is what in potential could happen. For example, if you're standing at the front door of your house, or I'm standing in front of my house, and somebody asks me, where are you going? If I go to the left, then I would give him one answer where I'm going. If I go to the right, I would give him a different answer. And neither answer is wrong. It just depends on which way I go. So what the prophet tells us is, if a person or a nation or the planet continues in this direction, this is where you will get to. So there is a potential of a horrible war of Armageddon, or what we call Gog Magog, but that doesn't mean that that has to happen, because all it means is if I take the steering wheel and I change directions, I go to a different place. I go to a better place, because we believe that free will is more powerful than even prophecy, because prophecy only works in the one level above nature. You have the natural world. That's the world where scientists work. And then you move supernatural. That's the world where prophets work. But wisdom is higher than supernatural. It's beyond the natural. Wisdom is the source of creation. So therefore, by making wise decisions, just like if you're driving, you suddenly see something in the road, you're intelligent, you drive around it. So therefore, in the path, even though the prophet said, hey, this is what's on that road, but you still have a superpower over him or her by being able to use wisdom. So therefore, these negative things do not need to happen. I'll give you another example. The Torah says, actually the Talmud says, that every prophecy has to happen. But we just got done saying that that's not true. So how do we understand this? So it's as follows. If the prophecy is a positive event, then it has to happen. If it's a negative event, then it doesn't have to happen, because the fact that it's negative means it doesn't really exist in reality. For example, if you have little kids who are scared of the dark at night, and they come out yelling, Mommy, Daddy, there's monsters in our room. Now, for those little kids, they really think they're monsters. But if you turn on the light, the kid feels better because he sees there are no monsters. So it's the same idea. When we are in darkness, that's when negative prophecies occur, and we could be afraid because we're in darkness. But suddenly when light goes on, the darkness is gone. Whereas something which is positive has to happen because it's rooted in reality. Let's take this one more step, because it's a very deep idea in Judaism. The Gemara discusses this idea. What happens in the following situation? On the new year, Rosh Hashanah, is the year in which a person or the nation is decreed, how much rain will fall on that year. So what happens if we are on a very high spiritual level on Rosh Hashanah, and a decree from heaven comes out for a lot of blessing? However, 2 months later, we get into a big fight with each other, and all of our holiness goes out the hole, right? That's why it's called holiness, because it's got a hole in it. You have to be careful not to lose it. So we lose our holiness. Well, what happens is the decree of all the rain. So the Talmud says, because it's a positive decree or prophecy, it has to rain. But what? It rains in the ocean. So the rain still will come, but it comes down in a very negative, unhelpful way. What about the opposite? What if we're at a very low level on Rosh Hashanah, and as a result of it, we're not worthy of a very high amount of rain? But then we realize how stupid we are, and we fix, and we become smart, and we start to treat each other correctly. Well, now we're holy people again. And why, as holy people, should we get such little rain? But yet, it was already decreed. The answer is that the little rain will rain exactly where we need the water. So therefore, you see from this understanding that even though through the manipulation of spiritual power, we can control events in the physical world, so therefore, nonetheless, the way that they will ultimately manifest is going to depend a lot on our attitude. Okay, Now back to what we're talking about, the third paragraph. Again, first paragraph is I connect to God. Second paragraph is I connect to the commandments. Third paragraph is I connect to this traveling, this trip of life. You know, it's funny. Somebody pointed out once in English, you have a word, history. But if the same letters for the word history also can spell his story. History is God's story of what happened in God's creation. So we have that third paragraph, which is to remember the history and the future of where we're going. Because if you don't know where you're coming from, you have no idea where you are going. That's like a given. Okay. So now let's look at that third paragraph for a minute. The third paragraph says, if you have a garment of a certain size, because if it's too small, it does not require anything, but it has to have 4 corners on the garment, then it says to tie on them these things called the tzitzis. Now, it doesn't tell you in the Torah how to tie them. It doesn't even tell you how many strings to use. The only thing it tells you in the Torah is that one of the strings, but we don't know one of how many, but one of them has to be a color similar to blue, but it's actually called a different color, a different word rather. It's called tchelet. Tchelet is kind of a sky purple blue. It's not really a true blue. It's not navy blue, and it's really certainly not purple. But that's what the idea of the tchelet are. Now, what you will notice is when you come to the oral Torah, which of course is what makes Jews different than Christians and Muslims who also read the Bible, is you'll find that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knots, 5 primary knots. There's one here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now these 5 knots represent the 5 fingers on your hand, or they represent actually the 5 levels, which is symbolized in the Hebrew letter Hey, which is the number 5, the 5 levels of creation. So therefore, basically, it permeates, it goes from kind of, if I may use the term, nursing, like a mommy who nurses her baby. So in a way, the garment is heaven, and it nurses all the way down into the 5 lower levels. Now, you also can notice that the amount of times that it is wrapped around each one is more. Like here, there's only, let's say, 6 or 7. I don't remember right now. I apologize. And here, there's even more, and then more. And then the last one is the most. Now, these numbers, which I can send you a book if you like. I have a PDF of it. It'll explain these much more in depth. But everything here has a mystical connotation. However, let's keep on a simple level for right now. What happens is like this. We, you, me, we are at this knot. Now what happens is from here, so to speak, upwards is what has happened. But now at the end, suddenly nothing here is in a knot. Not only is it not in a knot, try to say that 10 times fast, not in a knot, but it's let me see, it could be worse. It could be, it's not in a knot in a nut, right? Can you try that one? It's not a nut. It's not a knot in a nut. All right, forget it. the nut said it's not in the knot in the nut. We can make this into a song if we work on it hard enough. Okay, but what you realize now is that the strings now are loose. The simple idea is, this is you. How are you going to tie them? What are you going to do with your life? God gives you the raw material. God gives you your future. But I mean, we don't actually tie them, but that's the symbolism, that you're the one who is involved in tying up your life with your thoughts, your speech, and your actions. Now, the other thing is this blue line. The blue line, again, it's called tcheles. or tchelit. And the blue line, the word tchelit also means tachlit. Tachlit means to choose, and tachlit means the goal, the matara. So therefore, the blue symbolizes where are you going. In fact, you know what? I'll just show this a little more. The blue, following the blue line among the white lines, is a certain sense of always remembering that amongst history or his story, there is something that you have to find. You've got to trace the hand of God in history and in your own life. Because as we spent many times in our classes, life in this world is called olam, which means from the word alam, which means hidden. This world is hide and go seek. Find God. That's what it's all about. God created the Hebrew. Now that you, since you're all learning Hebrew so well, you've already learned that the first two letters are Aleph Bet of the Aleph Bet, which spells the word Father, Av. God is the Av of creation. But if you turn those letters around, it becomes Bet Aleph, which is the word Ba, come. So God says, come to me, find me in your life, find me in your community, find me in the world. That's our job. And we only have so much time because nobody gets out of here alive. So therefore, remember, I think I might have told you this once. My rabbi said, why don't we have hands like ducks? If we had duck hands with a web, you would think you could catch things. But with fingers, time is always going to go by. You cannot hold on to time, but you can shape it. You can make it. You can create life with your time. And as a result of the efforts that we apply in this world, the reward on the other side is phenomenal. But we don't do it for the reward on the other side. We simply do it because it's the right thing to do. And if God wishes to reward us, that's very nice. But at the end of the day, my job is to be a human being, not an animal and not an angel, just a human being. And if I do that, then I'm doing what I'm created to do, and that's already a good thing. Okay, so therefore, watching the idea of the blue of the tchelet teaches us that there is always something of wisdom among everything that is happening. The other main important thing here about the tzitzis is that, you have like the little peekaboo. You have like the little place where the head goes through, and then you have them on all four sides to teach you a very beautiful thing, is to teach you that you are the center of the world, and God is right there with you. So even though we talk about finding God, I'm going to show you something with my hand. This is how my rabbi taught me, so I'll teach you as well. If you are standing like this, and all you need to do is simply turn around, right? If somebody feels they are far from God, it's not like you're 13 miles from God. You just got to turn around. If you draw a circle, the last point of the circle is right next to the first point. So the ability to find God is not hard. It's right there. It's right here. And that's the idea of the tzitzis, to remind you that in the middle of the four corners of the world, you are the center of the world. And God is right there with you. And no matter which direction you go, north, south, east, or west, the tzitzis are there to protect you and to remind you. Why? Because in the game of free will, is that you're going to be challenged by what you see with your eyes and what you hear versus what you know. And we'll see this now in a deep, deep way. In the same paragraph that talks about putting on the tzitzis, God says the reason to put on the tzitzis is so that you will see them, and by seeing them, you will not go after your heart's and your eyes. Now, there's a problem here. If you are an English teacher or an editor, you would immediately see there's a mistake. God forbid. I'm just saying that it would seem like a mistake. Certainly God didn't make a mistake in writing the Torah, but it would seem like a mistake. Why? Because it says don't go after your hearts and your eyes. Shouldn't it be the opposite? Shouldn't it say don't go after your eyes and your heart? You're walking down the street and you see a Rolls Royce drive down the road. So you see the Rolls Royce. So now you see the Rolls Royce, your heart starts thinking, whoa, I wouldn't mind having a Rolls Royce. But it's not like your heart is thinking about a Rolls Royce and then you see it. It's the eye sees it and then the heart wants it. So it's kind of funny. Why does the Torah reverse the process? The answer is very deep. In fact, if you get this answer, you could change your whole life with this answer. This answer can be absolute freedom. Freedom. Freedom to be happy. Freedom to be in love with life. You know, I want to just tell you, I think I told you this story. I'm sorry if I repeat stories, but I try not to. But I'll tell you a true story. So in the Holocaust, there was a story of a group of Hasidic Jews and their rabbi were standing on the line to go into the gas chambers. Now, the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, they did not tell the Jews that these were gas chambers. All the Jews, when they were standing on line, they thought they were going to take a shower. And only at the last minute did they realize they were being gassed to death. So in this particular story, suddenly the word like fire went down the entire line. What was happening? Now, of course, no one could run because the Nazis were right there with machine guns and so on. So when this Rebbe realized he was going to die with his students, he quickly grabbed their hands, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them, and they started to dance. They started to do an amazing dance in a circle of incredible joy. And the Nazis came over and told them to stop dancing. And the Jews didn't even pay attention to them. They just kept dancing. They shot in the air. They just kept dancing. Finally, they started to shoot the Jews who were dancing. And even after the Jews were dead, they couldn't stop shooting. And even after they had no more bullets, they kept hitting the body, screaming, "Die, Jew." Now, the Jews had died a long time ago. But what the Nazis realized is you cannot kill a Jew. You might be able to separate his or her soul from their body, but as soon as that happens, God grabs that soul and kisses that soul and takes care of the soul. You cannot kill a Jew. All you can do is take him or her out of his body, their body. So therefore, that idea of understanding that means that if you have the freedom of joy, then no matter what's going on in your life, you can still be happy. Doesn't mean that your happiness will take care of the problem. Doesn't mean that you still don't have to deal with concern about the problem. Happiness doesn't mean you become an idiot. Happiness gives you the power to be smarter, because a deep inner happiness means that you really believe in God and know that no matter what is happening, Gam Zeh Tovah, this too is for the best. So therefore, here's an amazing tool for that freedom. Why does the verse say, do not go after your hearts before your eyes? It should be the opposite. And here's the phenomenal answer. Because our eyes only see what our heart tells us. Let's take a look at fashion. Okay, so in America, they have a magazine. Actually, they probably have 1,000 magazines in America, because America, I don't know if anybody ever told you this, but in Hebrew, I'm recording this no less. Anyhow, I'll do it. What the heck? In Hebrew, if you break down the word America, it's also two words. Reka. The nation. Reka, empty. The empty nation. That's how the words Amraka, Reka, nation, Reka, empty. America, the empty nation, which is very appropriate for our brother Esau, because the Romans were the empty nation. They all had to steal other people's cultures in order to make it like it was theirs. All the Roman gods, those were Greek gods. They just changed the names, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So in America, they have thousands of magazines because America is all about getting you to work hard so that you'll spend your money buying things. You know, in America, they used to say, shop until you drop. It's all about buy, buy, buy. And now our cousins, the Muslims, have fallen into this Asaph trap. My son now lives in a city that's called Dubai. Yes, yes, please do buy anything you like. Buy, 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 do buy, right? I mean, they put it right there in the name of the city. Although he said they're having a very hard financial time now. So they're thinking of changing the name of the city to Do Sell. But in the meantime, right now, it's still Do Buy. So you have their women who are so taken advantage of by advertising. Madison Avenue is a road in Manhattan, right near where I grew up, which is where all the big advertising agencies, Young and Rubicam, you name them, they're all there. And their whole job is just to convince you that you can't live without an Apple phone version 320. How could you dream of not having it, right? Oh, my whole life was just to have this. So they sucker you into this. So you just keep your money, keep working. That's slavery. That's slavery to the nth degree. And people don't even think, do I even need it? Because once it's fashionable, God forbid you're wearing something from last year. People think, who's that, right? So what happens? They have a magazine, for example, called Vogue. Every month it comes out. Every month it tells women what kind of clothing to buy, what kind of makeup to buy. And they say, here are 12 great ideas for how to cut your nails. Okay. Now, could you imagine one month you go over to the Vogue magazine and it's just blank. It's just blank. There's nothing there. No pictures, no articles, nothing. And there's a little note on the cover. And the note says, editor's note. Dear reader, what we wrote last month was so spot on, was so good, we don't have anything to say for this month. Right? That would never happen. That would never happen. They're going to tell you, remember those 12 ways we told you last month how to cut your nails? Well, we have a new 12 ways this month because it just gets you to keep buying and buying and buying. Now, here's the interesting thing. Because you read that magazine, or because you buy their lies that that's important and that's what's worth working hard and paying your money for, because of that, you are educating yourself. But you know, you go up to the Himalaya mountains and you meet the people of Tibet and you show them the latest fashion from New York, it doesn't mean anything to them. They're like, who would ever want to wear something like that? Why? Why would I want to wear that? Or you take the clothes that they are wearing and you come to New York and you try to sell them. Well, I'm sure in New York you'll find a couple crazy people who buy anything. But for the most part, whoa, why would I want to wear that? So everything that we think is important in fashion, or not just fashion, everything that we buy is because we believe it first. We've been educated to think that that's what we need. So therefore, the things that our eyes are looking for are the things that our heart tells us to go look for. You know what that means? That means that the way that the outside world programs you is the way that you relate to your life and your world. But that also means that you can hack the system. You can hack their software, and you can cut the wires, and you can become your own programmer. You decide what's really important. You use your brain and your heart to really understand what is important. And if you do that, then what you will see with your life is God. That's what happens. That's the whole idea of this tchelis. The tchelis reminds you that when you go out in the world, you're going to see a lot of these little white strings. Don't get trapped. Look inside them and find where is the goal of where you're going with your life. And the best way to do that is to think about when you're a very, very old man or woman, when you're at your last breath of your life and you look back on your life. What would you want to see? What's going to make you happy? Or God forbid, what's going to make you regret that you blew it, God forbid? Well, whatever that is, that hindsight is still in front of you. You know, I had an amazing opportunity in my life to meet a very, very religious Hasidic Jew from London. His name was Rabbi Zalman Margulies of blessed memory. He was a direct descendant of the Baal Shem Tov, and he was a multi-billionaire, one of the wealthiest people I ever met in my life. He was a member of a special club called these are a certain hat they wear, bowler hats they're called. He was a member of the Queen's Bowler Hat Club. Of maybe 15 people in the United Kingdom were members of this club. Phenomenal. And he was one of the most humble. Did I tell you about him? Does this sound familiar? I'm getting old. I'm starting to fear I tell everything twice. But this story is so good, it's worth telling. It's because this is like a true story I saw with my own eyes and ears. So he invested in one of my companies. And so when I would go to London, I would stay in his house in a very religious area for Shabbat. Fine. Saturday night, actually every night except Shabbat, he would be, let's say we were sitting, one particular comes to my mind, one Saturday night, we're sitting in the kitchen having something to eat. His wife, he had, I think, 12 children. We're all sitting around. And all of a sudden, he looks at his watch and he says, oh my gosh, it's 9 o'clock. My customers, my clients are going to be here. He jumps out of his chair and he goes into his private library. And his butler, they had quite a few people who worked in their house. The butler goes over to the front door. And at the front door was a line of people that went down the entire block of where he lived and around the corner again. There were between 100 to 200 people at the front door. All of them very poor people, Jews and non-Jews. It made no difference to this man because everybody's made by God. And the butler would let them come in one by one. They would come into his library. He would know all of them by name. He had a box where he wrote down about each one of them. What happened last time they were there? Did they speak to the doctor? Did they get help from the police? Whatever it was, he knew everything about them. And he lived to take care of them. A multi-billionaire. This is what he did. He sat every night to welcome them into his house. And nobody ever left that room without a smile. I'll just tell you two more quick stories about him since we got off on this. I had to fly back to Israel on Sunday, and I was with my business partner, and he had to fly to New York. In those days, they had an airplane called the Concorde that could get from London to New York in a few hours. So his Rolls Royce was broken, so we had to go in the Volvo station wagon. Fine. So My friend Label and I, we get in the back seat. He's in the front seat, and the driver with the white gloves is at the wheel. Now you have to understand, this is 1982 or 1980. He already had a phone. Phone. Just say the word phone, and it starts to ring. He already had a phone in his car. And when he got into the car, he called his main office. And the main office starts to talk to him about the business while we're driving to the airport. And he says, you know, the 10,000 refrigerators that you bought in New York have come to Germany a day early, and they're not opening up the dock for the boat to come in. So he says, put them on the phone. So here we are driving the streets of London. He's talking to this guy in Germany, and he's very angry, and he's yelling at him. And all of a sudden, my friend in the back seat sneezes. This gentleman puts his hand over the phone, turns around to us as if he was our grandfather, and in the most soft way says to my friend, bless you. Okay, next. We're driving a little further, and he says, oh, I don't have any American dollars. So the man in his office, the switchboard, says, no problem. I'm going to send Timothy. Clearly, the name Timothy is not a Jewish name. I'm going to send Timothy downstairs. When the car pulls up, just give him your passport. He'll stamp it, and he'll give you $5,000 in cash. So this man looks out the window. He says, wait a minute. It's raining. Don't send Timothy down. I don't want Timothy to stand in the rain and catch a cold. I will call you when we are 1 block away so that he can come down then and not get sick. Think about that. Think about that. How many billionaires do you know give a hoot if Timothy gets sick? Who cares if Timothy gets hit by a car? Who cares if there are poor people outside my door? And why should I give to the non-Jews? I'm Jewish. But that's not how he thought. He understood in his heart that every human being is holy. Every human being is created by God. And if unfortunately most of the people in this world are not in touch with that, it doesn't mean I have to be like that, because I'm the one who's going to answer to God about me. And that's how he lived. So he lived because the Torah educated his soul. And then when he looked, he didn't see Jews and non-Jews. He didn't see black people or white people or yellow people or red people. He didn't see that. He just saw creations of God. That's all he saw. And that's how he lived, and that's how he related. And that's what it means in the Shema Yisrael when it says, do not go after your hearts and your eyes. It means we have the ability to program in ourselves what it is that we really know is of value, and therefore to be in tachlis, to be on the path that will really lead us to something that is very meaningful in our lives. That's the whole idea of tzitzis, to constantly feel surrounded by God, to feel one with God, to feel at peace with God, and at the same time to be able to look at those loose strings and think and ask ourselves, what is it that we are doing with our lives? How are we tying up our time that's going to be who we are forever? And that's really what that idea is. But we cannot get there unless we do the first two. The first paragraph, which is accepting upon ourselves our relationship with God, and the second one is our relationship to the commandments. Now, why are they separate? Why shouldn't it just be one, or let's say 2 paragraphs? Why do you have to have one for first accepting a relationship with God and then having a relationship with the commandments? So here's a mind-blowing idea. I'm just going to deny that I ever said this. And if you say, you did, look, we got the video, I'll say, no, you guys photoshopped the video. It's not really me. I have a red beard. That guy with a white beard, that's Santa Claus. That's not me. Okay. So here's an amazing idea. Now that I know you're fluent in Hebrew, I feel we can go deeper into these subjects with the Hebrew letters. So you have a word in Hebrew called truth, emet. Aleph, mem, tuf. That spells amet, as almost sounds like the word amen, because they are. The first two letters are the same, but the last letter is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the tuf, and therefore it's amet, is truth. Okay. What are these three letters? So before we get there, there's an amazing Gemara in Tainus, which doesn't mean anything to you yet, but someday when you guys will be experts in the Talmud, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. And especially when your children and grandchildren become great scholars among Am Yisrael, they for sure will know what this is all about. So it says that Jacob never died. That's pretty amazing. Because if you read the Bible, not only does it say he died, but they even embalmed him like a mummy. Right? So what does it mean he didn't die? So one level means like this. There are many, but I'll just give you one example because I don't want to get too far off the path here. When you go out tonight and you look at a star, the closest stars to this planet take something like 27 million years for their light to come here. It's not like you walk in your house and you turn on a light bulb and you're seeing the light bulb in the light. The light from a star, the closest ones, are 27 million years away. So you're not seeing fresh light, right? Like you have stale bread, so now you have stale light. The light coming from the stars is old, right? 27 million years, pretty old, okay? So now, what does that mean? That means that the very star might have died. The star that you're looking at might not exist. And you say, what do you mean it doesn't exist? I see it with my own eyes. No, you don't. You don't see the star with your own eyes. You see the light from the star, but you have no idea if the star still exists. It may have burnt out a long time ago. So that idea is that the light of Jacob continues to shine in this world by the fact that we live a life that he set in our direction. And what is the life that he set? So in our prayers, which you'll get to, or maybe got to, in the end of the morning prayer, it says, Titain emet li Yaakov. God gave emet, truth, to Yaakov. Now, put these two things together. God gave truth to Jacob, and Jacob never died. Ooh, something interesting here. What happens if you look at the word truth and you take off the first letter aleph? You only have a mem and a tuf. That word is death. The word death is inside the word truth. The only difference in Hebrew between the word for truth and death is the aleph. So what was it about Yaakov that he had truth and therefore never died? He might have come out of his body, but he didn't die. Just like we said before, a Jew cannot die. So he went up to heaven, but that's not dead. 99% of the people you see walking around alive are not going to go to heaven, unfortunately. That's called dead. But he didn't die. So what happened there? Yaakov was the heart. Abraham was the right arm. Isaac is the left arm. But Yaakov is the heart. So the three letters that spell the word truth are Aleph, which is for the word love, ahava. Mem is for the word mitzvot, commandments. Taf is for the word Torah, wisdom. So you have the heart that loves, the body that does mitzvot, and the tough of the Torah that fills our soul. But guess what? You could have all the Torah, all the commandments. You could be the most religious looking Jew in the world. But if you don't have a heart that loves God, if you don't have a heart that loves other human beings, and if you do not have a heart that loves the land of Israel, then you're dead. No matter how religious you might be. And there are many people like that, unfortunately, that look very holy and look very religious. But when you listen to their voice, there's anger. There's self-righteousness. There's looking down their nose at you because they are holier than thou, which is not true at all, but that's just how they think. So therefore, the most important difference between death and truth is your heart filled with love. Now, having said that, that answers the question, why do we have the first two paragraphs of the Shema? And we'll stop here. Because before you can get involved in acting with the commandments of God, you have to first have a love affair with God. That's the first paragraph, Shema Yisrael. That paragraph, V'ahavta et Hashem, and you will love your God. If you don't have that in place, there's no point in doing the mitzvot. But if you do have it in place, then there's a huge point in doing the mitzvot, because talk is cheap, but actions speak louder than words. So when you actually do a mitzvah, there's no greater way of showing how much you love God than by doing that which God has asked of us. So that's the order of the Shema. First, the love affair with God, V'ahavta es Hashem. And then I'm ready to do the mitzvot. And then I'm ready to go on the path of life, because I've got all I need to live on the path of tchelet, on the path of the tachlit, of choosing my tachlit of where I'm going to go. So hopefully that's a little insight maybe that you can now think about, and hopefully it's got some value. And I will send you the recording, and I love you guys, and it's really great to see you. I apologize for having not been around for a while, but I'm back, thank God. And so thank you very much. And only good things on the way, God willing, only good things. Bye for now. Bye, everybody. Bye for now.